After a successful 1995, it's time to start talking about Windows games from 1996. And there were a lot of them. I mean, just see for yourself. Three Schools of the Toltecs is a Western-themed point-and-click adventure game. You're Fenimore Fillmore, and by a set of quite unfortunate events depicted in a fully animated intro, you learn about three schools that can unlock the mythical and supposedly great treasure of the Toltecs. So naturally, you're so into it. And set out to find all three schools necessary to find it, and then treasure itself. You're not alone in those pursuits, however, as there are others after it too. So whomever will get to it first will become obscenely rich. The game uses a similar technology to LucasArts' Scam engine, with screen divided in two, gameplay window on top and smaller one with command verbs and inventory at the bottom. And it's a tried and tested formula, so there's no reason to change something that just works. After a certain portion of the overworld map is uncovered, it can be used for fast traveling. You can however also ride the donkey or hand-pump train trolley if you'd like. So there's that. While most puzzles are inventory-based, you are given few choices of answers in many conversations, and this can actually affect the progress of the game. So, if you're into adventure games and never knew of Three Schools of Toltecs, it should definitely be on top of your to-play list. 3D Ultra Pinball Creep Night is a collection of 3 different horror-themed pinball tables from Sierra, and it's excellent. And also I lied, but only a little, because there is hidden 4th table that can be unlocked while playing. But on the face value, there's only 3, so let's stick to that. And all of them look great in high-res SVGA presentation and near-lifelike 3D. In 1996, Creep Night was easily the best-looking pinball game out there. Beautifully animated table elements and numerous extra minigames paired with often multiple balls on the screen at once make up for a super smooth and fast gameplay that's as addicting as best pinball games can be, real or otherwise. Creep Night's sound design is top-notch too. All the samples are great fit to the spooky, dark and nightmare presentation, and coupled with earlier mentioned graphics, make up incredible package that all fans of the genre should own and play, even today. It's worth pointing out that as all other 3D Ultra pinball games, this one too does not focus on realism, but on fun. So plenty of extra side tables, minigames and physics-defying features are included. It may be a turn-off for some, but I love it. Up to 4 players can play 3D Ultra Pinball alternating. Creep Night is a game that just works amazing whenever there's few of you around and you can't agree on a game to play. Just run it, let people try it out and witness how all of them will enjoy it. I doubt that anyone would find a reason to complain about it. 9. The Last Resort is a surreal first-person view point-and-click adventure game mechanically similar to Myst. And not unlike it, most of your time is spent searching for clues and solving various logic or musical puzzles. There are often weird mechanisms and contraptions too, so if you're accustomed to Myst's gameplay, you'll feel right at home in 9. The main story revolves around you having inherited an old mysterious large mansion and having to get rid of 9 evil muses that have taken it over in recent years. The strange environments of the mansion feel alive, creepy, like an old amusement park that has been long abandoned and partly reclaimed by nature. Sadly, other than the literal one-liner I just told you, there's not much story in 9. That said, fun and involving puzzles more than make up for it, and stellar cast of voice actors makes it a must-play. I mean, you get to listen to greats such as Robert De Niro, Cher, James Belushi and Christopher Reeve among others. And it's something that was definitely not the norm in 1996 in gaming. Interestingly enough, the cast is a result of game being made by Robert De Niro's own development studio, so yeah, back in the day he did invest in some of the more modern entertainment rather than just movies. 810 Cuba is a successor to earlier 810 Attack, and it puts you behind simulated cockpit of an 810 Thunderbolt 2 once again, this time over painstakingly modeled island of Cuba, to the point that none of the missions is constrained to a smaller piece, a region of the island, and you have a complete freedom of movement. You can actually forfeit your tasks and fly around the whole map that looks and feels as if it was alive, at least by mid-90s standards. So there's buildings where you'd expect them to be in reality, trucks drive around, ships dock in and out of ports, and even random enemies may attack you just because you're in a foreign military craft over their country. It's grounded in realism. The very same can be said about the simulation aspects of the game. The physics are as real as they could be in 1996, and the flight dynamics are excellent. The damage model is great too, and only the parts of the plane that actually get damaged in combat will be affected by it, with bits and pieces flying off even if appropriate to sustain damage. If that wasn't enough, the cockpit features many buttons and switches that you can actually click to toggle, and not just use keyboard shortcuts. And all that, coupled with the fact that there's no radar, as it's an old-ass plane, makes up for very exciting and challenging gameplay in which you have to be on top of your game all throughout or face the consequences. There's 12 missions included, but sadly they don't form any real campaign and are all completely standalone, which may not be an issue for most, but to me feels like a bit of a wasted opportunity, as you lose that experience of progression other games serve. But that's not a big issue really, it's just how the game's made. What was its biggest problem though was that it was ported from Mac, where it released a year earlier. And by 1996 on PC we had 3D acceleration everywhere. Both cheap and more expensive cards seemed to be popping up left and right like flowers after rain, and we were getting used to high color, smooth and not jagged presentation. 8 and Cuba came from a system that was not using this at the time whatsoever, and it was a straight up conversion. As a result, it looked dated basically on arrival. Well, I say straight up conversion, but an excellent mission editor present in Mac Original was entirely omitted for PC, and it more than made up for lack of campaign or visuals. Still, even without it, if you're a fan of air combat simulations, 8 and Cuba is a title you should not miss. If you're not, then maybe start your adventure with them with a different game. AD Cup is your typical early 3D rail shooter. You're a cop and you're out to get the baddies. Basic stuff really. Yeah, well, it may not be the best of game story backgrounds, but it is what it is. We've sure seen worse, haven't we? Anyway, the game is divided into 6 missions, each of them split into 3 smaller stages with a boss at the end. There's only 3 of these missions available as you first launch the game, and the remaining ones are unlocked while playing. The arsenal of choice or lack thereof that you start with is a standard police-issued gun and a bazooka of rather unknown origin. But you do get to pick up weapons from the fallen enemies, so there's more than the starting set to choose from in the end. While AD Cup is not much than a weaker copy clone of Virtua Cup, it's a pretty decent one, so if you like the genre, you'll love it. AD 2044 is a point-and-click adventure game with a very unusual premise. In the not-so-far-off future, a group of radical women revolutionists hijacked nuclear missiles and demanded to be able to share the power that the men held over the world. Fair request if you ask me. Everyone wants a piece of the pie, right? Since the response was negative, however, women launched the nukes, to which men responded with their own counter-launch. Now, there's a lot of logical errors in this story, like dozens in these 2 sentences alone, but for the sake of how interesting and unusual it is otherwise, I will not point them out. So, today, or not today, but in the present of the game's grim future, the world lies in ruin, right? As most missiles hit their targets, effectively eradicating life on the planet. But not entirely, it seems, as a lone 1,000 women in a remote location, originally on a conference of some sort, survived. And after the dust settled, they formed all-female, not that they had any choice in the matter since they were the only ones left, underground society. They hid from radiation and survived on their own. A little while later, in 2044, during a routine mining operation, a capsule with preserved hibernated man is uncovered. He's not only still alive, but also the last man on Earth. AD 2044 is a Polish game and it takes in heaps from earlier old Polish cult sci-fi movie called Sex Misja, which translates to Sex Mission, if that's not obvious enough, and has nearly identical plot, at least up to this point. In AD 2044 you play as that man who escaped the captivity and tries to find his way out of this crazy world. Now, I bet all that sounds hella interesting to you, right? I'm Batman. No bros, there's no cat women society anywhere. Sorry guys, he's just curious. Still, I gotta disappoint you, the game is not particularly good. Aside from what I just told you, the story is very superficial and nearly non-existent. The puzzles are mostly inventory and item combining based, but will require a lot of tedious and worst of all, unmarked pixel hunting to find and pick up the right items. The humor is a bit stale and very odd. On the other hand, so is this channel, so you may very well be used to it. Despite all I just told you, you won't really get to meet any women, only women-shaped androids. So yeah, it's not great. Fans of the genre will probably hunt it down and complete it despite all I just said, but others can pretty much skip it altogether. I was unsure if I should even talk about AI Wars: The Insect Mind here, all because I'm torn between considering it a game at all and an educational software, and I avoid covering educational games. For the most part, there are some outliers obviously. Anyway, for the sake of the video, let's agree that it's a game. So, it's all about combat, about creating battle machines called cybags and placing them in battles against other similar machines. So you have to create your cybag, equipping it with various useful in combat items like shields, mines, missile launchers, guns, grenades, energy dischargers, scanners, cloak devices and even self-destruct unit. And you have to do it in a way that will not only take ammo and fuel use under consideration, but also heat. You wouldn't want your cybag to overheat mid-combat and fail now, would you? When all that's done, and you've made your first awesome and deadly shiny cybag, the real game begins. And no, that's not action-packed arcade romp against others. Nothing of the sort. It's programming. Yes, you heard that right, programming. Because without the proper software, your cybag is just an immovable shell, a bookend piece of steel with guns sticking out of it. So, using a so-called CAICL language, similar to BASIC, you have to write an algorithm of behavior for your cybag that will make it the best, the strongest and most deadly cybag that there ever was. Now, when you're done and your keyboard managed to cool down from all the typing, you're ready to pit your cybag against either a different one made by yourself or a friend, or one downloaded off the internet. and the battle plays out in 2 or 3D on an enclosed battlefield. Once it's complete, you're given a printable rundown of the whole encounter along with scores. It can be used to optimize and modify your cyberpunk build or programming to make it even better. In the end, AI Wars is robot design and programming, and it's most fun if you have a friend who's also into it, so that you could keep trying different builds against each other. Playing it alone against downloaded or even old designs gets old quite fast, sadly. Ace Ventura is beautifully presented an animated point-and-click adventure game based on TV cartoon, which in turn was itself based on a movie duology by the same title. You play as Ace, who's, well, a pet detective. And you'll do precisely that. You'll fight 4 animal-hating villains, you'll rescue endangered species, gather clues and solve not always logical puzzles. As a matter of fact, if you're ever stuck in Ace Ventura and don't know what to do, try doing things you wouldn't have done otherwise. The crazier, the better. And while it may sound stupid, it is actually a pretty useful hint when it comes to this game. Anyway, the game is obviously filled with humor to the brim, and hilarious situations seem to spawn behind every corner, so you will find yourself chuckling often at some of Ace's comebacks or commentaries. That said, the humor leans towards more adult themes. It's not obscene or overly sexualized in any shape or form, but jokes will most likely land for a bit older audiences than preteens. While Ace Ventura is completely linear, the ever-present craziness, stupid jokes and over 60 unique and interesting locations make it a fun and involving experience all the way through, even if for a single playthrough. And because of that, I will go out of my usual way and recommend it to anyone, not only point-and-click lovers. Oh, and while the game received only average scores all around the world, being considered solid but not special in any way, in Poland out of all places it was beloved and gained small but still cult following. Afterlife is LucasArts' humorous sandbox strategy/economic simulation game. You build and manage heaven and hell simultaneously, and in it you have to prepare appropriate zones. In hell they're based on 7 capital sins, and in heaven they center around 7 virtues. New souls arrive through gates regularly and go to their respective areas that they belong to receive punishments or rewards for the former lives. For them to reach their destinations, however, you need to make sure to have a working street system that's connected to specific facilities. Souls that have no way of getting to where they're supposed to wander around the hell or heaven aimlessly, and it's bad for business. Cause yeah, it's an economic simulation at heart after all. And since all souls are your source of income, those that have no place to go, after a while of wandering, are irreversibly sent back to Earth. All the buildings require personnel to operate, and these can either be trained in training facilities or hired. Afterlife is a really interesting concept that is actually pretty well realized, with a lot of micromanagement, economic challenges and random disasters. If you like the genre, definitely give it a shot and don't sleep on it, cause while the premise may seem unusual, that's what's best about it. Mist's arrival on the gaming scene, whether you liked its gameplay loop or not, was important for many reasons, one of them being spawning number of similarly looking or playing games. And while many of them were disappointing, some weren't. And Amber Journeys Beyond was definitely one of the better ones inspired by it. It's a first-person horror adventure and tells the story of Dr. Roxana, who created astral mobility by electronic resonance device, in short, Amber, and uses it in the seemingly haunted mansion she moved into to conduct her experiments to confirm the hauntings and presence of ethereal beings. Soon after she does, however, all the contacts with her cease, and this is where you come in. You're asked to investigate what happened and, most importantly, find her. So you have to traverse the mansion, learn all its secrets, use the Amber device to communicate with the ghost via lucid dreaming, help them, and with each ghost story solved, you'll be a step closer to figuring out how to help Roxana. There's quite a few inventory and mechanical puzzles in Amber, but the emphasis is put on storytelling and learning everything you can about the mansion and its ghost inhabitants. I'm not the biggest fan of Myst-style gameplay, even if I understand its popularity and appeal, but Amber is actually kinda interesting, especially in how it puts the dreamy sequences storytelling at its forefront. It's a breath of fresh air and something that you may like too. Amok is a futuristic sci-fi from behind the back action shooter that takes place on the planet of the same name. The planet has been long ravaged by the war between 2 opposing gigantic corporations, both bent on annihilating the other and controlling the planet itself. After close to 5 decades of continuous war, a fragile peace is reached and people can finally breathe with a hope for a better future. Or so it seems, cause enter you. Or to be precise, you under a direct order from a third company, one that supplies mercs and gear and was secretly killing it in profits all throughout the conflict, taking huge contracts from both sides. And it's not in their best interest for this peace to last. So you, in their most advanced and custom-made bipedal robot walker, are sent to disrupt the peace and reignite the conflict so that the war would resume. I'm Batman! I know, I too thought that they were upstanding and trustworthy, but here you go. You always learn these things last. So, yeah, I'm disappointed in you. Former savior of the universe and knight in a shiny armor defending virginity of numerous princesses in the respective towers in the respective castles. you used to be good, and now... Anyway, your despicable self is sent on various linear missions to complete series of objectives of increasing difficulty. So you'll be destroying military bases, power generators, landmines, infantry, tanks and submarines of various kinds, and even some of the local to the planet aggressive fauna. Even if I'm still seriously disappointed with you, I have to admit that Amok as a game is really fun. It perhaps wasn't the best shooter in 1996, but it was a blast even if it did not use any 3D hardware acceleration. Oh, and it featured really fun couch split-screen co-op and deathmatch modes, so if you have a buddy with you and he's as evil as you are, you can both chip into destabilization of the peace accords. Area 51 originated in the arcades before being ported to PC and all the major 32-bit consoles of the time, and as the title may suggest, it takes place in the infamous Area 51, where supposedly all the captured aliens were held. Whether they were or not, Area 51 is chock full of them serving as enemies, and it's an on-rail first-person crosshair shooter that's action-packed and will keep your mouse's wheel red-hot from all the aiming and shooting you'll be doing. Unless you play it with a modern mouse, then nothing will happen to it. Even better, if there's two of you, you can team up to kick even more alien butt and send them back where they came from, wherever that is. And that's how Area 51 should be really experienced, as it shines with someone else there with you to share all the wins and losses. Alone, while not bad, pales in comparison to much clearer and better looking high-res games in the same genre, such as Virtua Cop for instance. Area 51 is not a bad game, in fact it's great if you play with someone else. Alone, it's average at best and a decent fun for 1 or 2 playthroughs at most. Still, if you're a fan of the on-rail genre, you shouldn't skip it. Asterix and Obelix is an arcade game based on the famous French series of comic books of the same title. It's not the beat-em-up you saw in the arcades though, even if its graphics quality is on a similar level. Very cartoony, colorful and with beautifully drawn vibrant backgrounds, it is more of a side-scrolling action platformer, where you task with finding various artifacts all throughout the Europe, and on the way as usual for these tutorial goals you'll encounter thousands of romans to beat up, many boars to eat and numerous magical potions to drink. It's funny how the two heroes attract these enemies and items wherever they go in the world, isn't it? All in the straight from the comic book fashion. And you can play as either of the two or as both, with a friend in a co-op multiplayer, which once again obviously is the best way of experiencing the game. With a friend, sharing wins and losses like two real goals would. So eating roasted boars and drinking questionable elixirs that may or may not have been spiced with hallucinogens. Most likely they have though. Asterix and Obelix is clearly aimed at fans of the graphic novels they originated from and younger audience, as it's pretty samey and repetitive. Meaning that while the levels change the way they look, they all play more or less the same, and in about 30 to 45 minutes you'll be able to experience everything that the game has to offer, other than the locations. It's a waste of an opportunity, but if I'm to be frank, it's not a bad game and I've played many that were much worse. Baldies is a real-time strategy originally developed for the ill-fated Atari Jaguar, a first fake 64-bit system, and in 1996 ported to PC. Why was it fake? Well, it was not using a 64-bit chip, but rather two 32-bit ones, and people in the marketing, rather than reading up on how bits work, it shouldn't take more than 5-6 minutes, I must add, did a very basic math adding the two and coming up with an impressive sounding number that meant literally nothing. But you don't care about that, you want to learn about the game. Your main goal in Baldies is to develop and manage a community of your small bold followers and to defeat opposing group of so-called hairies. Because of course enemies of naturally bold folk had to be lush-haired beautiful people. Game logic. Anyway, Baldies is a mixture of a god game and real-time strategy with some simulation elements thrown in for a good measure. It is composed out of 20 levels divided into 5 worlds, each with its unique theme and progressively increasing difficulty, so you'll expand your tribe, though I'm not sure I should call it a tribe really, community sounds better. So yeah, you'll expand your community by erecting buildings, placing your Baldies in specific rooms and then assigning jobs or tasks to them. The color of the robe that the Baldy then wears signifies what job was assigned to it. There are 4 types of Baldies overall. Red, which are workers, blue that can upgrade and maintain your initial house and other structures, grey that are soldiers and can be equipped with weapons, and finally white, who are scientists that research and develop new inventions and weapons. These roles can be changed by dropping Baldies into rooms of other jobs, completely nullifying what we know from real life about education, experience and acquiring knowledge. Never mind. Because despite this little annoyance, Baldies is a very unique and fun game that's much easier to understand while playing rather than listening about it. Bedlam is an isometric action shooter set in the futuristic sci-fi BattleMech universe. And just to be clear, I know nothing about BattleMech universe, so I'll be spitting names that mean literally nothing to me for the next minute or so. So, your squad of 3 pilots a huge remote assault tank, in short RAD, and is pitted against the mutated monsters called biomechs that took over human installations. How and when they did just that is irrelevant. but it's easy to guess who's tasked with clearing the biomex. I'll give you a hint. It both ends with and is pronounced you. Anyway, the easiest way to describe Bedlam would be to compare it to Crusader No Remorse or Crusader No Regret that we spoke about in earlier DOS videos. With a difference that you're not going around a huge complex but are exploring an isometric map filled with various bodies. Controls are more similar to those of Syndicate though, with left mouse button to move, right to shoot, and you can switch weapons with number keys. And your rat is about the size of a small bus. And not unlike in Crusader, nearly everything on the screen can be destroyed, which is a little something I always enjoyed in my shooter. I mean, the more things that can go boom, the better the fun. It's simple math, everyone knows that, right? Bedlam is a simple but quite fun shooter, that the only issue with it that I could think of are the constantly respawning enemies, which is just a bad game design for most types of games, but whatever. If what you see on the screen looks like fun for you, it may be worth giving it a go. Bermuda Syndrome is a side-view action platformer with adventure elements, very similar to cult classic Flashback, but with beautiful high-resolution presentation and no rotoscoping in the animations whatsoever. I mean, the animations are not bad, just not really lifelike as they were in earlier classic, and end up feeling a tad stiff. You play as Jack Thompson, a member of US Air Force Strategic Squadron during World War II. While on the mission above Germany, you're shot down by German fighters, and as you go down in fiery blaze, a portal opens up, eats you like a fresh chocolate-filled donut, and you end up on the other side crash landing, in the parallel universe or an alternate timeline. You've no way of knowing. But something? No, everything is not right. There's a jungle everywhere, you're in the middle of it, clueless to what had happened, struggling to gather your bearings. And then you witness a young woman tied up, trying to get loose just when a gigantic dinosaur is approaching to feast on her. So naturally, you help her escape, cause you're not playing Amok anymore, and suddenly, somehow, you're a good guy once more, and learn that she is a princess that was left there as a sacrifice, and from then onward, she becomes your in-game companion. Bermuda Syndrome revolves around traveling around what feels like hundreds of platforming one-screen panels, finding and gathering objects, and using them to solve puzzles and various adventuring bits. While it may not be as groundbreaking as Flashback was, it's a beautiful and fun to explore game, with an interesting mysterious story to uncover, and it's well worth your time if you like those kinds of experiences. The year is starting off with some fun games. Sure, they may not be the biggest hits yet, but I assure you that when we're done with it, you'll be well versed in some of the biggest and best games of the year that dropped on Windows. That's to come in the future though. Today, let me know what you think of games that we've just spoke about, and let's discuss it in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.